Phil, thank you so much for joining us today on the Athletics of Business podcast. It is awesome to have you here.
Thank you for having me. This is great.
Obviously I filled the listeners into, how we got connected. There's so much here, so much to talk about. Want to jump into your journey and how you evolved and got into doing documentary work. It's absolutely amazing.
First of all, thanks for having me. It's rare that I meet someone who has seen all of my films, and fortunately that group is growing. But I'm so glad that we connected, and I've listened to the podcast, and I really, we're kind of like-minded, and I enjoy it. But I started, I guess technically I started in high school making highlight videos for my basketball team. And we had, my dad was a coach, and we had made a couple state championship, we had a few wins in the state championship and down in Virginia. And I just had a computer with the video editing and started doing my best to emulate what I saw on ESPN Classic, and kind of took it from there. When I was looking at going to college, I knew that as much as I love basketball, that it wasn't going to be a career for me. I thought about coaching, but I did have this pull into the creative field, and my mom was a writer, and they, both of my parents definitely nurtured that creative side. And so I went to college with the idea that I wanted to get into filmmaking.
So is that where the creative side of you came from? I mean, from your mom and her writing and just watching her, what she did, or was there somebody else that kind of nudged you towards creating, highlight films, or was that just your love for ESPN?
It was I think my mom was an English teacher and freelance writer. Her name was Carol Wall, and she had articles that were published, Southern Living magazine, Atlanta Journal-Constitution. She had novels that were agented but never published. She did have one book that came out in 2014 called Mr. Owita's Guide to Gardening. But anyways, I would say her impact on me, I realized later after the fact. And what she really did for me was kind of demystify this process of getting your work published. And so I got to see her do the work from start to finish, from concept to execution. And then I got to see her go through the process of contacting agents or sending queries out to magazines. And, she would read the rejection letters, or she would show me her paycheck. And so I got to see, I started to realize later that other people, it's a mystery to them. They think that it's, and we all, I think, have this tendency of, one of my favorite things to hear is people will say, oh yeah, did you hear about that story? They're making a movie on it. They are making a movie. Well, they is somebody, and
right. Who are they?
Yeah. And so I've heard people talk about, Coach Aaron at Fork Union, who I'm making a documentary about. I've overheard someone say, they're making a movie about it. Right. So, and
did you throw in there? Yeah, I heard they're an amazing person. I mean, they're really cool.
Exactly. They're super talented.
Yeah.
So what mom did for me was really show me, that this can happen in our house, and that it's about doing the work and recognizing what you can contribute, and that you have your own talents, and that it's about finding your voice and going through that process. And part of it's really frustrating and can feel isolating, and you can be doing it in what feels like obscurity in some ways, but it's only about who says yes. And that, I think she showed me that, and then sort of combined it with, I used to get, when I was a kid, amped up for basketball games by watching highlight videos. I would watch the NBA, highlight videos. I had a Charlotte Hornets commemorative VHS that was of their first season. And I guess it was probably about 45 minutes or an hour or something. and I'd watch that like before, like every game when I was a little kid.
Who was your
you
guy?
know?
Muggsy Bogues?
Yeah, Muggsy Bogues, Rex
Muggsy.
Chapman.
Yeah, they had a squad. They did have a
Yeah,
squad. Yeah, they did have
yeah.
a squad. Well, you know what's amazing about that? And I didn't really think about this is she, full transparency, showed you the good, the bad, the ugly, right? But it didn't discourage you from going into creative work.
No, no, it didn't. It didn't. Because it, you're going to get that with everything, right? I mean, my dad was a lawyer, basketball coach. I saw his process as well, right? It's work. And they were both doing what they loved and what they felt was meaningful, and they had passion for it, and they wanted to have a positive impact on people. So yeah, it was like, you got to do something. But I guess, it sort of, I had a dream, right? Like I dreamed of making films, and I got the same charge out of having someone react to one of my projects that I got out of winning a game, and so I felt like that was something that I should pursue.
That's interesting. I want to get to in a second here. We're going to get to your very first documentary, and for obvious reasons. But I want to back up. What was it like playing for your dad, and what was you just talked about sometimes you feel like you're dealing in obscurity when you're working, right? And you're doing the editing, you're doing all this work, and we always talk about the unseen hours. But in basketball, it's a completely different world. There was no obscurity, right? And then you're playing for your father in a great program with great success. What was that like?
Yeah, I mean, we weren't always good. I think my dad's first year, they were like 3-17. And I was in like sixth grade at that point or something. And we knew that we were coming up with some really good players. J.R. Reynolds, who ended up playing at Virginia, was in that group. But yeah, so I mean, at first it felt like I had to overcome the hurdle of I'm on the team because my dad's the coach. And but eventually that I got sort of, got over that after, we started having that early success. But playing for him, it was really special because we spent so much time together. We talked about basketball at home. We were going on all these trips together. We shared the same goals. We both wanted to win the same games and win the state championship. And so it was a very valuable experience for me looking back on it and having those very intimate moments with him where, now we can sit and talk about those. We talk about those days, and I can't imagine not having that.
Right.
But he was he's like a philosopher. He's a well-read guy, and he's got a liberal arts mind. And so I really appreciated, and a lot of guys do how he approached the game and how he used it to teach greater life lessons. And we would have our thoughts of the day before every practice. And he also showed me how to adapt. I mean, I think one of his favorite things to say, well, one of the things he said was, the most important words in coaching, and perhaps he's taken it from someone else, is, it ain't working. And we would see that. I could see him in practice doing that. Let's say we had a rough game or lost a game, we would do things differently the next practice, but it wasn't like a punishment. It wasn't like we're going back to the basics, you guys are out of shape, or like it was never our fault.
Right.
It was, I didn't prepare us properly, and now we know what we need to work on, and we're going to work on these things and shore this up, and then we're going to win. We won't have the same issue again.
Right.
So.
And we talked a little bit about this when we first connected yesterday, but growing up a coach's son, we see the process, right? I mean, we got an education inside the locker rooms, at the practices, in the car, going to scout a game, and you had mentioned previously that your mom and dad did something they loved. So I think at a very early age, we understood that it's a struggle. Even if you love what you do, there is a process and there is a grind and there is a commitment to it that is unmatched if you really want to be great at it. How much does that show up in your work today?
Well, I mean, I just left a film festival in Chagrin Falls, Ohio. It was a documentary, the Chagrin Documentary Film Festival, and surrounded by documentary filmmakers who were in town. It's a beautiful place, wonderful festival. Everybody there is passionate about what they do. I mean, especially in documentary, no one is doing it for the glory of it,
Right.
or for the financial windfall that just doesn't happen. People are there because they're passionate about the story that they're trying to tell. And so that totally shows up in what I do, because I feel compelled to spend the time on the work that I've done, right, and that I will do. It's like I heard one of the filmmakers describing how she came to decide to make her film, and she said almost in the same moment she was excited and then like disappointed, because she realized, oh shoot, this is going to take me 5 years. Right. Right. This is going to be really hard.
Right.
And I can definitely relate to that, because it's just, especially you make a film and it's years of work alone, and then there's this brief window of time where you get to celebrate it and talk to other people about it, and it's off on its own. It has its own life, and hopefully people watch it and learn something from it, and maybe people seek you out, kind of how we're talking here. But it's kind of rare, when you compare the amount of time spent working to the amount of time.
Right. Mm-hmm. And then that's it. It's over, right? I mean,
yeah.
there you go. What was going through your mind that first film festival, when it was your first documentary was shown? I want to jump into that. What was that like?
That was incredible. I guess the first time I ever did that was I had a film about VCU going to the Final Four. Mm-hmm. And we screened at the Richmond International Film Festival in Richmond, Virginia.
Right. I got to think people were excited there for that.
Yeah. And I think there were like 500 people there. Yep. And it felt so amazing. People were cheering during the film. People were, yelling at the screen. People were like standing up in the middle of it.
Did you have was Shock in the house?
I think he was. He brought the team.
Okay. So cool.
Yeah, he was there. It was awesome.
Yeah. What was that like to work with them?
That was amazing. They obviously it was like it felt very natural for me to be around. Yeah. I traveled with the way that story worked is I was doing some stuff for VCU in my client business, and I had made a thing for them to raise money for their in addition to their arena. And at that point, I turned it in February of 2011. We were done with it. And at that point, the best thing they'd done was beat Duke. And then a couple of weeks later, they were in the Sweet 16 going to play Florida State. And yep. The guy called me back and said, you think you can come with us and help us beef this thing up, and we'll redo this video. And of course, it just got out of hand. In a good way. And but it was really nice for me to just kind of be a passenger, so to speak. I got to travel with the team to San Antonio and to Houston, and be around the team meetings and be in the coaches meetings, and it was fascinating to watch those guys prepare, to watch them create the scouting reports, just the level of I mean, there was intensity there, but I also was taken with how comfortable they were. You know, the thing that they said back then, one of their mantras was aggressive, confident, and loose. And that's something that has stuck with me. And I think it's hard to articulate and explain, but I get it when I see it. All right, you know, I know it when I feel it. And that's a good state of mind.
Now, totally unscripted question here. How hard was it to cut stuff out of all the film footage that you had? Like,
For that doc,
yeah,
for that
I
doc,
mean, there had to be so much you wanted to keep in there, but you only have so much time.
yeah, that one was really tough because it was sort of there was a bit of a we wanted to include as many people as possible. So we wanted everyone on the team to have a speaking part in the film, and we interviewed everybody, or I interviewed everybody. So that was one challenge, was telling the story using everybody's voice at least once. That's a complication. That's difficult. The other thing I wanted to do was give the experience of watching the game that you would not get having watched the broadcast or going back to watch the broadcast. And so the way it worked was, you know, I had footage that was captured by the VCU videographer from like the baseline. I actually wasn't filming during the games because the NCAA rule was one videographer per team. And VCU had their guy.
Right.
And then I had this drive of all of these CBS cameras that had all these different angles. I forget how many cameras there were, but each game had multiple hours of footage from different angles. And so I was dealing with the play-by-play radio from VCU, the commentators from CBS, all the different angles, and just trying to create this experience that you wouldn't see in the broadcast.
Right. That's unbelievable. Now let's go back to, bring it back to you. All right. Have a great high school career. It's time to go to college. Your first documentary is about a gentleman who's a huge impact on your life, not just your life, but hundreds, if not thousands of men. Right. And,
yes.
And can you talk about, so your journey a little bit, pick up after high school and what happened from there?
Yeah. So I ended up, I was getting recruited to play college basketball my senior year in high school, and I ended up getting injured right around the time that coaches, you know, really started getting more serious. And I had a high ankle sprain, so I was out and kind of indefinitely. Someone suggested, you know, you ought to go to prep school. And that was sort of a new thing for me. I hadn't heard of many guys doing that. Now I realize lots of guys do it. And I wound up trying out at Fort Union Military Academy, which is it's in Central Virginia. It's near Charlottesville and Richmond. And the coach there for 42 years was a guy named Fletcher Arrett. And he has sort of this, you know, no nonsense approach to the game, to how he deals with his players. And I ended up trying out there and somehow making the team. It was probably the most difficult year I've had, but it was the best thing I've ever done. It led to going to Williams College in Massachusetts, which is exactly the type of place I wanted to go, and exactly the type of thing I wanted, door that I wanted basketball to open for me. But playing for Fletcher Arrett, I think of that guy every day. He is known in the basketball world for being kind of the greatest coach that no one's ever heard of. So you talk to household names.
Yep.
Fletcher Arrett is a household name.
I mean, how about Billy Donovan's quote?
Yeah, I mean, I traveled the country interviewing guys, and about him for this film I'm making called The Passing Game. And Billy Donovan, his quote is basically, when you talk about success in the game of basketball and you talk about influencing and impacting guys' lives, there's no better coach than Fletcher Arrett. There's no one who has come to have that level of impact on the game. And, he's had in 42 years, it's 12 new guys every year. That's, do the math. And he's had thousands of students. The guy, he was a biology teacher. Basketball, he got like a stipend eventually. I don't even think he got that much of a stipend when he was first coaching there. Basketball was his side job, but his impact on the game is unrivaled, and his approach is somewhat unorthodox because he's so simple. And so like I would sit with guys who would ask me to, some of these coaches at that level, like, guys who'd won national championships in college basketball would sit me down, take me out to dinner or lunch or whatever, and have a pen and paper and say, like, diagram that offense for me, the passing game.
Right.
And then we would have this conversation about how simple it is. And a few guys would talk about like, well, I can't do that because we're getting paid too much money to, to be that simple.
And it's going to look really bad when our guys can't figure it out. When we just can't, we don't have the patience to run it, right? We don't have the discipline to run it.
Yeah. I saw one time Coach Arrett was on the court after our practice, and Bobby Crimmins was there. And at that time, Bobby Crimmins, he's an old Georgia Tech coach, and he retired and then got back into the game and was coaching at Charleston. So he was at Charleston at the time, and he asked Coach Arrett to walk him through how the passing game starts, which it typically starts with a down screen. And so Bobby's like, well, what if they switch? Well, what if, and Coach Arrett says, well, you go back, he's not open, you go back door. That's the rule, and they keep going. And Bobby just keeps coming up with, well, what if that guy's not open? What if he's not open? What if he's not open? And finally, Coach Arrett says, hey, get better players. You're gonna lose.
Get better players that can make plays for the love of God.
If you can't get open, the other team's got better players than you. So that's
at some point the questions run out, don't they?
Yeah.
Well, what else did he do? What was it about him? Because we talk all the time in our world about, in the athletics of business, the correlation between high impact coaches in athletics and high impact coaches in the business world. But and the meaning behind what he did, I want to read a quote from Sidney Johnson in the trailer of your documentary. And Sidney said, he said, Coach was a transformative influence on my life. He said the reason he took a chance on him was because he thought he was a good person. Now, obviously, it's broken up a little bit. And he said he took a chance on us to show us what honesty meant, what hard work meant, what faith meant, and it made us stronger. I mean, what was it about? Like you mentioned, it was the toughest year of your life in terms of basketball. Was that physically, mentally, emotionally, being pushed outside your comfort zone? And what was it about the way he was able to do that to you? But then all of a sudden you reflect back on it, and it was a game changer for you and for so many.
Yeah, but I guess the reason I say it was the toughest year is really because of the being in the military school. I mean, basketball was somewhat of a respite, and part of the basketball being such a rewarding and meaningful experience was that you knew what to expect with Coach Arrett. He set really clear rules and guidelines, and Sidney saying that about Coach taking a chance on him and so many of us because he thought he was a good person. I think that's really true. I mean, the first day of practice at Fork Union, Coach Arrett walks upstairs with a mesh bag and he dumps the practice uniforms on the court. And then he goes down the line and he says, hey, Wall, what number were you in high school? And I say, number 12. I'd been number 12 since I was 10 years old. I said, number 12. And then he looks down and he goes, okay, you're number 10. And he picks it up out and he goes down the line and he does that to everybody. And then he gives a speech that is about how a great player is a great player because it's something inside you that is special. It's not the number you wear. It's not the armband you wear. It's inside of you. And that's really what he did. He was someone who saw what people were capable of, even when they couldn't see, I mean, yeah. And he would realize that someone was a great rebounder, let's say, and say, that's all you need to do. You can go to the top if you just be what you are. And I remember one time him pulling me aside. We were leaving a game where I had I was in a shooting slump, basically. And it was impacting me. And he's walking with me out of the gym and he says, Phil, I do not care about your shot. I want you to get guys to their spots and to run the game. And I don't care if you miss, because if you get the guys where they're supposed to be, that's a rebound for us. And and the best way to score is off an offensive rebound. Yeah. So, it was just like, it's eye-opening, right. To be that young and in such an intense year, thinking what's going to happen with my life, to have someone basically saying to you, you need to let go. You need to stop doing what you've been doing, because clearly it's not working. You're not where you want to be, right?
Right.
And you need to be here for some reason, and you're going to use this. So he was just this. He had these moments. I mean, I honestly, the first day of practice when I played for him, he did that thing with the jerseys, and then he showed us how we were going to wear our uniforms. And then he showed us how we're going to wear our socks 2 inches above your shoe. And then he pulled out a jock strap and said, everybody's going to wear this. None of you are going to wear anything else under your shorts, no tights, nothing like that. And here's how you put all of this back on the ring. And here's how we wash it. And, if any of you mess up, we're going to run. And I remember he said all of that, and it was confusing. I wasn't sure why he was doing it. And then he takes the jock strap and he says, some of you don't even know what this is. And he puts it on over his shorts and says,
could you imagine trying to do that today?
Yeah. It says, this is how you wear this. Left foot first, right foot first. And it was it was hilarious. Yeah. But at the same time, he's given this speech that's basically, it's what's inside you that counts. And you can tell the size of a man by the size of their problems. Yeah. So if you can't do this right, then you can't sacrifice for your teammate when the game's on the line by setting a screen. You're worried about your shot. And I know it because you can't wear your socks right. And so honestly, that's the first time I thought somebody needs to make a film about this guy, because that was just, it so quickly cut to the heart of what I was going through, right? It made me kind of, it flipped a switch, yeah. Right? Like, oh my God, I'm learning something. So, and I'm enjoying it. And also this feels so intense. So he was just, he was such a authentic person, and you knew what to expect. And he had a profound impact on the game, and a profound, an unrivaled, when you look at numbers and wins and people to college and the pros. I mean, nobody's done what he's done, but it was done through a very simple approach that was repeated year after year after year, you know.
And completely selfless, not arrogant, no ego, not money driven, not, not about me, not some of the stuff that we see today. And I've got to ask a question. This is completely, I had not asked you this question yet, but I'm curious. I'm going to guess that he was really good at coaching everybody the same way, but treating everybody differently in the sense that knowing you in a one-on-one, but like getting to know you.
Oh my God. Yeah. I'm really glad you said that.
And we haven't talked about this. And full disclosure, this is just something that popped in my head as you were describing him.
No, I'm really glad you said that. He would go around. We had you would stretch every day in a circle, and it was a very regimented thing. 15 feet apart, you know, which by the way happens to be how far apart you have to be when you run the offense. Yeah. But he while you're stretching,
and that was probably intentional too, right?
Yeah, exactly. But while we would stretch, he would walk around to each guy and he'd put his hand on you, and he would have something to say. He would joke around, but it was about you. You know, it made it, we all felt special and seen and coached. And perhaps if he was hard on you the day before or whatever, I mean, he was someone, he always sort of closed the loop, never left you hanging.
Love that.
And it was never the person, and I guess this comes up later in the Standard film, but it was never the person who was making a mistake. It was your performances lacking, right? It was never a personal attack. The guy never cursed, but he could, you know, make a 7-footer feel like he just dropped his ice cream, you know, like he did coach everybody. Everybody was under the same rules, but he knew how to get to everybody, to each individual. A couple guys told me a story one time about Larry Davis, who was a fantastic player. I think he played at North Carolina and then transferred to South Carolina. Incredible scorer. And they told this story about coach puts Larry Davis in the game, and Larry comes down, pull up three, bam, you know, goes back the other way. Larry gets a steal, pull up three, bam, comes down, you know, next possession, Larry Davis, pull up three, bam. Coach Eric looks over at the bench and says, somebody get Davis out. You know, he's not running the passing game, right? And so, you know, he pulls the sub, gets Davis out. And while Davis is walking to the bench, Coach Eric turns around to the bench and said, but man, did you see that? Like, that was incredible. Yeah. You know, but he knew how to get to Davis, you know, and he knew how to get to me, and he knew how to get to so many guys. And it was about teaching you what you needed to know or learn or, you know, work on to survive, to get to and thrive at the next level, right?
Did you realize that when you were playing for him, and being a coach's son, I'm not patting us on the back here, it's just the reality of the situation. You grew up around this. But did the guys that played for him realize that's what was happening as it was taking place? Like they were literally living transformative moments?
I think that varied, you know. I mean, guys are frustrated. We're kids. We're 19 years old, 18 years old. We don't know anything. I definitely like felt that I was learning a ton and that it was transformative. I was also very, you know, acutely aware of the stress I was under, not knowing where I was going to go to school or, you know, what coach was going to walk into the gym. And that was hard to look beyond that. And I think a lot of guys, especially, you know, guys that maybe didn't have, I had people around me, my parents were were very realistic about what would be good for me at the next level and what the purpose was of that year at Fork Union. And we were all on the same page. And it was more fortunately lined up with the reality of the situation. Whereas some other guys, I think, were frustrated because they had unrealistic expectations, right? Like, being like, well, I just need coach to get Kentucky to come in here and see me play. And it's like, dude, you're not playing at Kentucky. And so some of those guys, I think, there's a long tail on this, right? I mean, you learn things through reflection as well, right? Like, wow, I didn't realize that coach was doing that for me at that point. So it was, I mean, for me, it was transformative at the time, but then also, of course, I've learned so much looking back on it. And then, I'm making this film about it, which is an exploration of his philosophies. And the central question of it is, how did he have this impact on people so thoroughly, to a guy, to a person? What's the experience of knowing Fletcher Arrett? And what are the philosophies that lead to that type of impact on others? And so it's hard for me to parse out like what I knew when I was 19 years old and what I feel is important now.
Right. And isn't that the sign of your legacy, right? And isn't that the sign of the impact that you have as a coach? It's like, how long do those lessons sustain? How long do they endure? And I think that speaks volumes. And I can only imagine how much you have taken away from the films you've done, because I have to segue into what brought me to Phil Wall. Okay. And I explained it in the introduction, right? And it was a former podcast guest, a former client, a friend of mine said, you've got to watch The Standard. You will absolutely love it. I said, what in God's name is The Standard? I mean, it was out of the blue. And so I woke up early one Saturday morning and opened up my laptop and I put it on, and I was absolutely mesmerized. And I'm not saying this because you're sitting in front of me. And obviously, this is true because I reached out to you about that, and when I looked up, I looked you up, then I saw the other work you've done. I'm like, all right, I have to have Phil Wall on the podcast. I have to get to know this guy. There's so much there. But The Standard, I mean, just tell us about that. Tell us about doing that documentary, what it's about, what you experienced, and the things that you took away from it.
Yeah, so The Standard it's a feature documentary, 90 minutes. It's about a 48-hour endurance challenge that is hosted by Special Forces combat veterans. Anyone can show up. Very few people finish. And I had known about the event. It's put on by a company called Goruck. And that company, they make military grade bags, they make apparel, and they started running these events. I mean, I think, I forget what year they started up, but it was maybe like around 2007, something like that. So they came up with these events to test their bags, because the bags go to combat. And so the founder of the company wanted to say, like, all right, let's figure out how to mimic combat scenarios, and let's figure out how to break these bags. What they found were so they started doing these overnight challenges that were 12 hours. And what they found were people would show up. People really love doing it.
Yeah, people like you.
Yeah, right. So I ended up, and then we'll get back to this film. I ended up doing a Goruck challenge because a friend had introduced me to them back in 2011 or 13 or something like that. And I did some marketing work for them, of like their early event videos to market their company. The founder, Jason, basically said to me, like, okay, Phil, everybody here who works for us is a Special Forces combat veteran or has done one of these challenges. So let's look at the calendar. When are you doing it? So I did one of their 12-hour overnight challenges, which those, like 98% of people finish because it's about team building. It was the most physically rigorous thing I've ever done. You get smoked in the first 2 hours. And the idea of that is everybody in the group of 30 people gets put kind of on the same level. And there's a special forces combat vet who is organizing, the events, and you're just sort of turning yourself over to them. You got the weighted rucksack on your back.
Right.
And we went through Philadelphia that night.
Wait, first of all, hold on, slow down. You're not giving yourself enough credit. What time of the year was it, A? And B, do tell about doing push-ups in the river that time of the year.
Yeah, it was February. It was February. I had my cousin with me and a few other friends, and then it was like,
Are they still talking to you?
Yeah. It was, and then like 30 other people. And we in the first 20 minutes, the cadre had us bear crawl like 100 yards down to the Schuylkill River in Philadelphia, and we were in the water. It was 34 degrees outside. We were in the water, push-ups, sit-ups, flutter kicks. Like, the guy knew the amount of time that we would be safe in that water, and he also knew that we were about to be moving for like the next 11 hours and 40 minutes, whatever it was. So it was.
So did you find comfort in the fact he was looking at his watch and he was not going to let hypothermia set in? I mean, for God's sake.
I mean, I sort of in the back of my mind, I knew that. And he was definitely, I don't remember exactly, it was a shock to the system, but he was definitely telling us that we would be okay, and that we just needed to keep moving. Everybody was fine, and everybody in our group finished, the next day. It was such a team building experience. And personally, it was very transformative because you're constantly faced with, we would have these group activities where we would have to we'd find a log by the river and we'd have to carry it 1.5 miles or 2 miles. And we would pick a navigator and a team leader and all this stuff. And let's say there's 30 of us, well, only 15 or 12 can fit under the log, and it's about all you can handle.
Right.
And so we had to like rotate. And so you're constantly faced with being rotated out and watching your teammate start to struggle and crumble and have to answer that question. Am I going to help, or am I going to take, my break? And so that was something that's really stuck with me. So fast forward a few years, Goruck is doing these, they've amped up their game a little bit because people love these events, and people kept asking for more and more. And so Goruck came up with this 48-hour challenge that is a condensed version of the Special Forces assessment and selection. And they take all of the elements of that and program it into this 48-hour period, and invite anyone to show up who feels that they are ready to take this on. And the main difference between this, it's called Goruck selection. The main difference between the selection and the challenge that I did and the other events that they do is that they encourage you to quit, right? And that's the real test. Whereas in the challenge, they don't let you quit because they know you can do it, and they're trying to encourage you and talk you through it when you do want to quit. But for the Goruck selection, they turn it on to another level.
Ooh, yeah.
The people who show up, that's what they signed up for.
Right.
They signed up to be pushed to their absolute physical limit and mental limit. And so having done the Goruck challenge, having been around people, the Goruck guys, like, I knew going into this selection that we ended up filming, that it was important to capture whatever happened in a way that allows intimacy for the audience, but doesn't interfere at all with the process that's going to unfold, because it's really important for the people doing it. The participants, it's really important for them. This is a special moment that some of them have trained like a year for. And for the cadre, who to describe it to, I guess, the cadre, for lack of a better word, are essentially drill sergeants who are running the event and telling the participants what is next, what the next iteration is, whether it's, it's all physically taxing. It's a combination of all different mental and physical challenges that are unpredictable and unknown to the participants. You just sort of give yourself over.
And that's the big thing, right? It's like the unknown of what's coming next.
Right.
That's what's coming next. And I love how they would build someone up and they're just completely setting them up, right? They're setting them up to break them down, or they were breaking someone down to force them to build themselves up. But what was really cool about this, and we'll put the link, we'll put all the information in the show notes. I cannot recommend this enough. What was really cool about this, the way you filmed it, it was almost like going back and being a coach's son for you in the locker room, because you would show them absolutely blasting a guy. And here he would go off into the woods to pick up another, X amount of pound weight. And as soon as he was out of their sight, they just have a normal conversation, right? They would just revert back to actually to like assessing the situation and what was going on. There's that poor guy. God knows what's going through his head, his mind, and his body. And here they are sipping their coffee, just having a conversation, right? And it was just really, what were some of the takeaways from that? It was mind blowing, the things. And now again, these are folks that signed up for it. They volunteered for it just to see what they're capable of.
Yeah, there's a conflict happening there, like and this is what made me think it could be a film. For the cadre who are running the event, they want to make, have an impact on people that's positive. They want to build better communities. They want this event to change people's lives, whether or not they finished or quit. But the agreement, if you will, between the participants and the cadre is essentially, I'm going to show up, I'm going to train and show up, and I'm going to do what you say, and you are going to tell me to quit, like nonstop. Right. And the conflict there is essentially, these cadre want more than anything to see people finish, but they have to play this role of spending the whole 48 hours absolutely just trying to trigger. I think one of the cadres says, trying to trigger that gremlin in your mind.
Yes.
That's telling you, I can't do this. I shouldn't be here. And if you'll notice, like in the film, the cadre, again, it's never about the person. It's about the performance. Yep. Right. And so it's just like, you are not up to standard. Everybody else is way ahead of you. When it's a group of people, right? They essentially pick on the weakest ones. Yeah. The people who are behind, it's like, okay, that's it. That's you. You're going to get special attention now. Right. And then, you'll see a person quit and the switch flips off. And they say, oh my God, man, that was incredible what you just did. We're so proud of you. Thank you so much, dude. Who are you? Yep. What do you do for?
Yep, absolutely.
And it's just, it's so clear that they're playing a role, and that role is actually in conflict with what they want most in their heart, which is to connect. Right. And in some ways it's a beautiful thing. But it was really important to me to make the film in a way that's clear. Because I think, like, we've been, I've been around coaching, I played basketball, I've worked all these basketball camps, I've been around it. And I've seen some people who will just, MF people for no reason. And it's more about just putting on a show. For whoever's in the gym or for the other players, and you end up like putting people down. Right.
And it's about them, which is
yeah. And in this, here are the people who are, for the hardest, the most elite of them all, who understand, in addition to being able to deliver that type of punishment, understand the greater purpose of it and are doing it for a greater purpose and are managing that line. They're walking up to it and they're not crossing it because they actually do care about the people.
Well, then you show that, right? You show that at the
Yeah.
beginning where one of the gentlemen talks about like, this is the one thing in life, like this is the one event that actually brings me to tears at the end when the people do finish. And there's some great stuff I want to share here. And they talk about commitment, sacrifice, and dedication, but they almost serve as, what life does to you, the way they do things, right? Because if they take it to your absolute lowest point, so you have to figure out what your why is, right? What your purpose is. But some of the stuff they said in here, and I'm going to say it a little uh, calmer than they do, but master the chaos and endure the unknown.
Mhm.
One that really got me: trample the weak, hurdle the dead. But you think about it, right? You think about it in the sense of the business world, your career, of just things you're competing for in general. Trample the weak, hurdle the dead, but dominate the man in front of you. But win or quit. And here's one that I absolutely love when you think, you put it in the team sense, because they talk about how high performing teams are made up of individuals who are selfless and committed to the cause. And here's the one that really got me when you start talking about that: don't disrespect the people who are here working. By
Right.
your performance, not you personally, like you said, but don't let your performance disrespect the people here that are putting in the work. And I love when and I don't want to give everything away, right? But when the one gentleman's laying on the bank, right, chilling out, sipping on his water, and the one
Right.
guy's in the water just dying. I mean, he's dying. And he goes, that's what's winning looks like, right? I mean,
Right.
that's it. It's plain and simple. And they talk about winning over and over and over. And they talk about, when you fail to meet the standard, that's losing. And
Right.
I just think that's so, you captured so much in there.
Yeah, I think uh, one of the things about so much of that you said is about winning, right? Like winning and losing. And it's important to note that that is sort of hard to define, and it's an ever-changing standard in the film, in the story that we're covering in the film, because whoever is in front is the person winning. And it doesn't really matter what the task is, the person who's doing it the best is winning. And I think that they're really using it as, because the real standard, right, is not quitting.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they're using that sort of winning and losing thing to make you feel like you don't belong, to suggest to you that you don't belong, right? Everybody else is doing this better than you. Right. What are you doing here? Right. Whereas, in my work, I guess, or perhaps in business, in your business, you can be the weakest link, the lowest common denominator, but in the next iteration, you might be the strongest of your team. Right. And it's about getting there. It's about getting to that point, to that next thing. Like, okay, yeah, this is out of my skill set. This isn't my role. But I need to support. I need to make sure that I'm respecting the other people who are working and figure out how do I perform here, in this task. And then when we get to the next one, who knows what that's going to be, but maybe it's something I'm good at. Right. And so I think recognizing that you're kind of that weakest link or lowest common denominator is something that's invaluable. And being able to talk about that with clients, for example. I mean, I have clients who will ask me to do particular things, and I'll be like, okay, you want to have that animated graphic thing. I don't know how to do that. Let me just say, first of all, but I'm in it. I'll find a way. We'll do this together, but I'm not going to act like I know how to do that. And then we're in a situation where, like in the standard, I'm just kind of crawling around in the mud while everybody else is 20 feet ahead of me, and I'm holding things up. Right.
Well, and it's just about taking that next step forward.
Yeah.
Just get to like you said, just get to that next thing, take that next step forward. And I mean, I think it's a metaphor for what we're going through right now, or what we've been going through the last 18, 19 months, right? Just the willingness and the ability to endure things that we don't have any control over, and just to take the next step forward and just to keep digging in.
Yeah. Take the step that's right in front of you, and that is the standard, right? Is to keep moving, to never quit. But yeah. And I guess when they're talking about, mastering the chaos and all of that stuff, I mean, you fall back on, in times of stress, you fall back on what you practice the most. And so you have to have trained hard enough for this event, for the Goruck selection. You have to have trained hard enough physically that when you are mentally, and physically so gassed and so at your limit, that your lowest point of performance is still putting one foot in front of the other, and instead of panicking and thinking about the warm fire and coffee that you can go get if you just stand up and quit.
Well, and you've been there before. If you're prepared, you've been there before, right? If you put yourself in situations that were equal or greater adversity than what you're currently going through, you're good.
Right.
You got this. Now, I want to segue to your the latest documentary, because it's an absolutely amazing story.
Oh.
And I stayed up, in full disclosure, quite late last night, watching it, rewinding it, watching it. And there's so much to it. Okay. And it's titled The Bookkeepers. And I'd love for you to walk us through just the story behind the story, because it really is great work.
The Bookkeepers it's a feature documentary. It's filmed from my perspective. And it follows my dad as he travels the country promoting my mom's first book after her death. Mm-hmm. So we talked about her being a writer early in the conversation. Mm-hmm. And she got her first book contract around 2010. And the book is called Mr. Oweda's Guide to Gardening, and it's a memoir that's about her experience with breast cancer and how that coincided with a friendship she developed with a Kenyan gardener. And they kind of ended up becoming these spiritual guides for each other.
Right.
And our families got intertwined. And it's a story that is about embracing affliction and living Plan B. So the book was about to come out, and the book came out in 2014, and her cancer had returned during basically the final months of the edit of the book. And it was kind of the last thing that she was able to do. She finished the book in the final window of time where she was capable of doing that. And so she had unfortunately, like a long illness that she eventually died from, and she kind of lost her mental faculties over a course of however many months. Maybe it was like 6 or 7, and she died in December of 2014, 1 week before her book was named top 10 of the year by USA Today and AARP. So sort of what happened was a lot of marketing opportunities, a lot of the events and interviews and stuff that Penguin Random House had set up got canceled. And she never got to speak, to advocate for her book, which is kind of, it's like, it's an injustice for me, something that needs to be righted. But a few of them invited my dad to speak. And so he started traveling to these places and talking to people ostensibly about my mom's book. But what he ended up doing was talking about her and their relationship and meeting her and his love story and what he was going through and sharing his loss and grief. And it became this really powerful exchange. I didn't set out to make this documentary, especially the documentary as it exists today. I had been capturing some material to help my mom get ready to publish her book. I did some interviews with her to put on Facebook and things like that when the time came to promote her book and to promote her as a speaker. And it just didn't happen. So my brother and my sister and I would help my dad at some of these events. And I went to a few of them and was really struck by what happened after, which was that strangers would walk up to me, give me a hug. They would tell me their story. They would tell me, I lost my mom, I lost my sister, my brother. They would share a loss with me, and it totally floored me because I didn't realize how much I needed to hear that and how much that helped me in those moments, you know, so proximal to when my mom had died. And so I started thinking, well, this is really powerful. What's happening here? Can I capture this story? Can I tell this story in a way, in a film, that will encourage this type of exchange from people who watch it? You know, and that was the impetus for, you know, making what is now the Bookkeepers. You know, and that process started in 2015, and the film premiered at the Austin Film Festival in 2020, and it won the jury prize and the audience award for best documentary feature. So I cannot tell you like how much that has meant to me, the process of making the film, but also just like, you know, I've had so many meaningful conversations with people, and that's really all you can hope for.
Right. Right. What about the car rides with your dad?
Yeah, much of the film is in the car, because we travel from on one of the trips, we go from Virginia to Montana and then back to Virginia, like through Georgia. And then we take a few other trips to Florida. We go to Texas. I mean, that was, again, it's like going back to the basketball, looking back on it, it's incredible to have that time together. But I think initially, like I was worried about my dad, you know, he's going out to these, you know, places he'd never been before. He's going to be talking about my mom constantly. You know, I didn't really know what impact that would have on him. And I was worried about, you know, how he was dealing with things, and didn't know what was going to happen in the car. And of course, I decided that I'm going to be trying to capture this film. So I was sort of, you know, in some ways, like he had the book as this distraction, and I had the film as this distraction.
Right.
I felt compelled to do something. Right. And, you know, my mom, one of our final conversations, she said, "You take care of our book." You know, and I wish that perhaps she could have been more specific.
Well, yeah, and that comes up, and we won't ruin it, but that comes up, and your sister really, I thought what she said was really profound, right? I mean, it was like, I think there's a deeper meaning to that, and it is very true, because she was a little bit vague in what she meant, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I think there's a lot of ways to look at it. And that's kind of what I think the film is. You know, I think it's important to leave things kind of open to interpretation, because people need to have their own discovery. You know, and those are the films I like, where I feel like I found something.
And that's how I felt. Like I was figuring something out as I went along before you guys told us the answer, right? Like, you know, especially when your sister said that. And then I watched the conversations you had after that. But, you know, going back to what you said, how you're worried about your dad. And it's interesting because he brings it up in one of the car rides where he talks about he's worried about himself.
Right.
And then he just kept talking. And it was like, it was so cool to see him work through whatever thought it was that wasn't making sense, but then it did make sense, but then it didn't make sense. And he was okay with it.
Yeah, I mean, and that's going back to playing for him. That's how he did it, right? He read all these different things, and then he walked up to us at practice and said, "This person says this person says this. This is what we should do.
Right.
You know, this is how we should deal with this." And you know, that's how he copes, for lack of a better word, right? The way that I cope is kind of turning on like approaching something with my intellect, trying to explain it in this other way, and doing it through the film in some ways. But yeah, I mean, those conversations in the car, it's not like I didn't know what to expect. I didn't really know what to capture. I didn't know what the film was about, right? And I found it in the edit. The edit is what made me decide what's important,
And how did your dad feel about that?
I mean, I think, if you've watched
Besides the fact that his son is brilliant. Okay. Besides that. Yeah.
Well, I think if you've watched him now for 90 minutes, know that he would say that my mom is brilliant, and he would say the same thing. He 100% is behind whatever she wrote or did, and me too. He treated it basically the same way he treated the book, which is like, this is special, and I don't know how to do what you do, and I trust you. There were like a few. It was interesting, like going through a few drafts of the film, or going through making different scenes to understand how I was viewing my dad, and where I needed to basically like get back in my lane, so to speak, to sort of like, at some point I ended the film with a closing slate that says like, Dad's book tour goes 225 events in 30 different states. He's traveled over 100,000 miles, and he will continue. And he says he'll continue for as long as it takes. Well, that's like editorializing in a way. It's like, get off the guy's back. Like, if he can do whatever he wants to do,
right.
It's up to me to take something away from it, to learn something from it for myself. It's not for me to like evaluate him or judge what he's doing or why he's doing it or what his motivation is. It's perhaps for something to explore and discover. And so making the film really made me realize the times when I was trying to get a hold of him, and try to explain or correct what I felt, was happening,
and then that brings a question in my mind. As you were sitting there going through all the editing, and you were, rewatching the footage that you shot, did all of a sudden, like, you realize something that you were, it's the old things begin to change when I changed the way I looked at them. Did all of a sudden you realize that maybe in the midst of the conversation, you missed something, and you picked it up during the editorial about your dad or about yourself or about the journey that you were on?
Yeah. I mean, things change their meaning, right? One of the things about the film is it's very repetitive. And I have him using the same words over and over, because he's giving a talk at all of these places. So he's kind of on a script. Right. And when we were just talking about, what are your strengths and weaknesses? At some point I sat down with this film and thought, okay, what does this content yield that is unique? We have all of these things. I want this film to sort of live in the grief canon. I want it to have an impact on people, a positive impact. But what about this story is unique? Everybody loses someone. And there's plenty of books about it. There's plenty of films that deal with it. Where does this one work? Where does it fit? What does it add? And so I realized, like, okay, I think I'm going to use the fact that it's repetitive, that he's using the same words over and over and over. And you start one place at the beginning of the film, and you end in this totally different place. The universe has changed. You end, with a guy in an empty room. You close with a guy in a crowded room. And in the beginning, no one loves him. And in the end, he's surrounded by people who love him and know him. Right. And so, but you get there and you feel totally differently about it. but the words in the closing of the film are the same as the words in the beginning of the film and in the middle of the film, but they've changed meaning.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And we, you know, me as the filmmaker, you as the audience, we are the ones who are putting the meaning on those words, right? And he's had his discovery, I've had mine. Hopefully you're having yours. But so, yeah, it's in that edit where I'm going back and realizing that that basically, I mean, shoot, I can't believe I'm saying this, that I didn't realize this, that he had what was inside him the whole time, right? Right. That's what
Right.
Coach Eric
Yeah,
says.
absolutely.
It's inside you, right?
Yep.
He had it inside him the whole time.
Yep.
And he fell back on his practice, and storytelling got him through. Through is not the word, but storytelling helped him heal.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
and it helped him find what's inside him. It helped me find what's inside me and what's important and what should endure. And so yeah, it's like realizing what the film was about, or what I wanted it to be about, made me reevaluate all those conversations. You know, it went from the more nostalgic conversations to about my mom and dad. You know, at first when I wanted to tell you about this story, I wanted to tell you all about like the painful months of how she died. But as time passed, I focused less and less on that. It became less. It's still, the voice is there, but it's not the loudest voice.
Right. And you honored it. You honored it from start to finish, and that was what was really cool about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So it's really it's a story that, it's a film that has changed. It changed me. I can't imagine going through this in any other way.
Yeah.
You know, I can't imagine how I'd feel about my mom dying without this project.
Right.
That has made me confront it and put everything on the table so many days, and only, you know, leave what's important and what should endure.
Well, and if you think about it, it's no different than Coach Eric, what he did. I mean, he was confronting his life every single day, but he was impacting you through things he realized, right? And as your dad did as a coach, and now here you are impacting so many others. I mean, I'm gonna tell you, like, I would love, as your dad was talking, watching the faces when you could see him in the room, or watching the body language from behind. And there's the one scene where I was ready to smack the dude sitting in front eating when your dad was talking, right? But then by the end of it, he was all in. I mean, he was locked in, he was laughing, he was crying, he was, you know, he's looking at other people. I'm like, yeah, see, you know, but at first I was like, this guy, I mean, first of all, you don't sit in the front of the room, you know, front and center, stuff in your face when this man is talking about this powerful stuff, but he came around.
Right.
No. But that's what's so awesome about it. I mean, the folks that you're impacting in just, you know, and it's all in your own journey. And before we wrap up with the last question, because it's an important question, where can our listener find out more about Phil Wall? Where can they find out more about each of the documentaries on social media, out there on the internet? Go ahead and fill them in.
Yeah. So my website is philwall.film. The standard is available in the US on Hulu. You can rent it basically wherever you rent and buy films. The Bookkeepers is currently on its film festival tour. We got a few festivals coming up here, and you can go to the website. It's bookkeepers.movie. And you can kind of track what our schedule is, but also you can write in if you got a group of people who want to have a screening or host a screening. You know, we're going to be starting that up in early 2022, and we're planning on distribution. We're talking to distributors right now. But if you got a group, you know, visit the website, get in touch, and we'll see if we can get schedule an event, you know, in your town. The Passing Game is the work of my heart right now. I am editing that right now. It is, it's another project that, you know, I started it in 2008, And here we are, and I'm still figuring out what it means, and I'm enjoying every second of it. But so that's one, you got to sign up on the website just to join the newsletter. It's going to be hitting film festivals here in the near future, and I'm excited to share that story, because again,
I can't wait to see it.
I think that I just want to give you the experience of having known Fletcher Arrett. I want you to, expand this family, right? Yeah, I talk to people all the time. They figure out, Fletcher Arrett. It's like, let's sit down and talk for a while and tell some stories,
Right.
So I want to expand that family and bring people in on the secret.
Well, and you mentioned something to me, and I'm going to build off what you just said, because I think it's very appropriate. You said something to me like the meaning of the films change, and what you're doing with the films have changed as you work on them. And we just talked about with the Bookkeepers how certain things showed up differently as it evolved through the process. How about with Coach Arrett? Were there things as you go back and watch these interviews and watch this all the footage that you have and all the things that you shot, and all of a sudden, like, just every experience you had becomes even richer and more valuable? Has that happened?
Yeah, it's happening. I mean, I think when I first started out the film, I thought I'm gonna follow a group of kids who go to Fort Union because I related to the kids, and I thought I'll tell basically my something that mimics my story, right? And that just it wasn't it. As I started making it, I realized, this is a real missed opportunity. If I want to sit down and talk to someone for 90 minutes about something, I want to talk to them about Fletcher Arrett,
Right.
and how he's made this impact. That's what we need to explore. So in terms of what I'm learning right now about the passing game, it's more like realizing what's important about his story and not trying to tell my own, or not trying to right wrongs that I see, right? It's not about putting Fletcher Arrett in the Hall of Fame. I don't really, that would be amazing, but it would be amazing because that's the story that we should all value.
Right.
It would be amazing because it would be good for us to be telling that story. But, what is really important is not making sure that he's a household name. What's really important is that he continues to have impact on anyone who crosses his path. And you can do that through film, and the film should be about, the things that you experience and learn knowing Coach Arrett. He has a profound impact on people, and he is incredibly engaging and funny, and it's just, the guy was he was amazing, and he sticks with me, and I think of him all the time.
That's awesome. Well, Phil, I appreciate you, and I appreciate the work you're doing and taking time out of it to join us here today. And we'll have all the links. We'll have everything in the show notes, okay, on the website. And I mean, thanks again. And here's what we have to do. We have to commit to this, right? When the passing game comes out and the film festivals start, A, I'm going to be at one of those film festivals, but B, we need to get you back on and talk about all the success that it's having.
That'd be fantastic. And thanks so much. This felt like a lot to cover.
It was great.
And I appreciate you doing it. Yeah, I'll definitely look forward to doing it again and staying in touch. And I love the podcast. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Phil. Appreciate you.
Thank you.